In the 1960s, Lincoln made this Continental Convertible. You sit in it, you put a finger on the wheel, and you point the car at California, and you don't stop until you get there. Everything about this is great. And it's in spite of the fact that you're not going to go quickly. You're probably not going to go anywhere you want to put the top up. Steering's light, the brakes take a lot of effort. Nothing happens here in a hurry. But what it does do is make you feel like you're going somewhere. This car was designed to be a flagship for Lincoln. And Lincoln was the flagship mark for Ford in so many ways, which means that on a certain level, this is the best of what they could do in this form factor, right? Which means that you're buying one company's idea about what an American car should be, as well as they knew how to make it. And you feel that when you drive it. Everything is, it's just calm and chill and stylish, and you don't care about what it doesn't do well, because like every other big, heavy 1960s American car, it doesn't really like stopping or turning. It's not super thrilled about it. It wants to be pointed at a coast and let rip. I love the detailing. I love how the housing for the gas gauge and coolant gauge is a Lincoln badge. The clock is the same way. There are Lincoln badges everywhere, hidden subtly in the car. All the switches feel tactile and simple. The motorized vent windows, the little rocker switch that tips them back and forth, the toggle, it's just satisfying. Harks back to that old French idea that driving should be a respite from the rest of life, right? That when you get into the car, it shouldn't be work. It's freedom from everything else, every other stressor you've got. Chances are, if you think about Lincoln right now, a handful of things will come to mind. Old people, big cars, bad small cars, a division of Ford that wants to be Lexus but isn't anywhere close, and a bunch of badge engineering. But once they were this. Well, it is a four-door, 5,000-pound, nearly 18-foot long convertible. And it's wonderful. Under the hood is a 430 cubic inch V8. In this trim, it makes 320 horsepower, has a 4-barrel carburetor, there's a 3-speed automatic, and it drives the rear wheels. This particular car has never been restored. It's seen paint work, it's seen some interior work, and routine maintenance, but other than that, it's as it left the factory. And when it left the factory, it cost $6,900. That was enough to buy 2 full-size Ford Galaxies. This in a time when a Coke cost a nickel, and you had to go uphill both ways in the snow to school every day, and democracy in America hadn't been invented. I don't know, it was a really long time ago. But the point is, it was really, really expensive. And every bit of it was worth it. In the late 1950s, then as now, Lincoln was Ford's luxury division. Difference was, then, they were making even less money than they're making now. That same time, Ford was thinking about redesigning the Thunderbird. They called up 2 proposals. One was big and swank, one was smaller and sportier. The smaller and sportier car got made, but the guy in charge of Ford at the time, a dude named Robert McNamara, took a liking to the bigger and swanker one. He had been thinking about killing Lincoln entirely, just wiping it off the map. But he gave the design division a chance. Take that Ford Thunderbird, make it into a 4-door sedan, make it into a convertible, go. 2-door, big hardtop thing, shouldn't be difficult, right? Well, at that point, the Lincolns from 1961 were already drawn, so a small team from the design division worked overnight, weekends, overtime, all of it, and made this. Now you have to remember where Detroit was in the early 60s, and specifically where it had been. They were coming off a decade of big, swoopy, voluptuous cars, soft sides, long edges. In the 60s, the reaction to that was cleaner, more simple, sharp edges. The cars got much, much, much daintier while remaining enormous, and this led the charge on that. And one of the coolest things about the way it's laid out and the way it's styled has to do with that Thunderbird story. In order to stretch that 2-door platform and keep the lines that McNamara wanted, the designers had to get clever. They couldn't have one giant door and keep this rear fender because getting into the rear seat became a problem. So they went back to something that had been dead in Detroit for 30 years. suicide doors. Now, those doors are super cool, but they present a couple of different problems. Namely, the car isn't very rigid. It rides on a separate frame, but the body itself is open in the middle. There's a giant hole here, and only this tiny toothpick of a B-pillar that both doors latch into. Now, on one hand, it means it's super cool, and it's pillarless, and you have that enormous bathtub of an interior you get to sit in with nothing in the way when the top's down. But the other side of that is that if there's any rust in the rockers or these pillars or the floor, the car becomes a banana and does this, and the doors don't latch, the top doesn't shut, everything comes apart. But it's super cool. It's so big. Now this is a 63, right? This is 2 years into production. There were a couple of changes. Grille changed, antenna swap sides, trunk lid got a little different. In 64, they actually gained another 3 inches of wheelbase. They are massive cars. So the number one concern here is rust, right? These are unibody cars. They have frame rails, but by and large, they're one big piece of steel stamped and welded together, which means you want to look at these rocker panels, these frame rails, the tie bars that go back and forth across the rear suspension and the front, everything that ties the subframe together. All of this stuff is critical, and there is no such thing as a bad buy of an unrusty Continental. So the second thing to think about here is complexity. These are not simple cars, but they were built before the era of computers and modern control boxes, which means that everything runs on miles of wiring, relays, switches, motors, and all of it controls something critical. Even the vent windows up there in the quarter windows are power operated. If you can find one of these with a working top, there are 2 rules. 1, don't use the top that often because it will break unless you have to. 2, if the top works, you can pack another $5,000 into the value because that's about how much it'll take to fix if it's broken. The final thing to think about is that these are not parts catalog cars. They were hand built and hand finished. They even put them on a dynamometer before they left the factory because they effectively wanted to break them in before they saw the customers, because they knew that everything here was a little bit special. Now what that means is that there's stuff like the heating and AC systems that are complex but simple. And it also means that there's stuff that you can't simply order out of a catalog. It's not like a Mustang or a Camaro where you can just call somebody and get the part you need. There are some specific touches, like that crankshaft mounted power steering pump is unique. It's literally bolted into the front of the timing cover and has to be removed to be rebuilt. It's a pain to deal with, and they don't always behave. It's one more thing in a litany of stuff that you have to pay attention to if you buy one, simply because it's just going to be more complicated than you think. That's the ground rule here. To give you just 2 examples, this power steering pump takes type F ATF fluid. If you put anything else in it, it'll leak. Cars have specific fuel pumps, and a lot of people put the wrong ones in. You put the wrong one in, can lead to vapor lock, car won't run right. Pay attention to the details, and more important, if you don't feel like it, or you don't think you might want to, find somebody who knows the cars well to work on them.
The Continental has grown increasingly popular with a wide range of collectors, contributing to an increase in value since the early 2010s, when a convertible like the one we've been driving could be had in number 2, excellent condition, for about $35,000. As of September 2020, the same car would likely set you back around $62,000. As always, values change over time, so please go to Hagerty.com/valuation tools in order to get the most detailed and up-to-date information.
Like a lot of big American cars, there's a speedboat element to it. You hear the exhaust, you aim the car in a general direction, and you don't think too much about anything else. Whatever passes under you is just water. It lives up to every standard you ever thought American cars should meet, right? And it comes from an era when style was king in so many ways. It's pleasant without being assuming, it's confident without being arrogant. Everything here is aimed at making you think less and enjoy it more.